Hello and welcome. I'm Carolyn Grimminger with the Public Affairs Forum of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin. Our program's mission is to nourish the mind and spirit and serve social justice. Our forums occur on most Sundays at noon and are free and open to the public. We encourage you to attend. Our church is physically located at 4700 Grover Avenue in Austin, Texas. For more information about our Public Affairs Forum, you can go to our church website at www.austinuu.org. Today's speaker is Julia Hanway. She was in charge of the 2014 World Federation of Right to Die Societies, which was held in Chicago and brought together over 25 countries participating. She has worked with the Final Exit Network as a volunteer since 2010 and is the Special Projects Coordinator, currently working on a North American conference focusing on dying in the Americas. Her husband, who's present with us today, is Robert Rivas, and he is the General Counsel for FEN, and he was a pioneer in the Death with Dignity movement. Let's welcome Ms. Hanway.
Thank you. First, thank you for having me come and speak here in Austin. This is my first time in Austin. This is my first time in Texas, so it's been a very pleasant experience. The title of our program today is How to Gain Control at the End of Life, or How to Achieve a Good Death. Final Exit Network is an offshoot of the Hemlock Society, which was founded in 1980 by Derek Humphrey. In England many years ago, Derek's young wife, Jean, had an inoperable brain tumor, and at her request, he helped her die. As a journalist, he wrote about this experience in a book entitled Jean's Way. He later wrote a book entitled Final Exit, which is the namesake for our organization. In 2004, Derek and members of the old Hemlock Society board formed Final Exit Network. The founders of the network believe that we cannot wait for laws to change, that people are suffering terribly now and need end-of-life education, support, and a compassionate presence if they choose to end their suffering. We believe no one who is suffering from untreatable pain or a debilitating disease should be forced to die a traumatic death, and no one should have to die alone. In a PBS interview shortly before his death, the leading Unitarian theologian Forrest Church made the following statement: "Death is not a curse to be outwitted, no matter the cost. Death is the natural pivot on which life turns, without which life as we know it could not be." He went on to say, a pro-life support position is not always a pro-life position. When we can no longer hold on with purpose, to let go is to die with dignity and grace. In 1988, the UU General Assembly passed a resolution supporting death with dignity. In part, the resolution says, the Unitarian Universalist Association calls upon its congregations and individual Unitarian Universalists to examine attitudes and practices in our society relative to the ending of life. It also states Unitarian Universalists advocate the right to self-determination in dying and the release from civil or criminal penalties of those who, under proper safeguards, act to honor the right of terminally ill patients to select the time of their own deaths. Final Exit Network and the Unitarian philosophy share common principles. We believe that our mission especially relates to 3 of the 7 UU principles: compassion, freedom of choice, and dignity for all persons. So how do you control your end-of-life and dying experience? Learn about your options, educate yourself, make plans. There are many easy-to-follow instructions, including forms provided by the state of Texas, which are accessible on your state's website. Share your plan with family, friends, healthcare workers, and very importantly, your own doctor. Learn about the laws in your state. The CHAT project is a database created by an institute in the Health Law and Policy Department at the Hofstra University School of Law. It is a very easy, interactive online tool that you can use to find clear instructions pertaining directly to every state. Many of you may have family and friends who reside in other parts of the country. This is a very good tool to use. You can just click on the state and it will tell you what the rules are for living wills, advance directives in every state in the country. This is the chat project. This is what you'll see on your screen when you go to it, and then there's also an interactive map. This is the map function. So it's very easy to use. Texas statutes are very clear in support of a physician's responsibility to follow advance directives if they are available. In fact, under your laws, a physician is subject to disciplinary action if they do not follow your advance directives. Texas has very good, strong laws. There's some states where physicians can legitimately say, I don't know if it's our laws protect me. In Texas, they are protected. And so there should be no reason, unless they have their own religious reasons for not following your advance directives. That's the discussion you should have with your doctor before you get sick or before you have a situation that's a crisis. Texas even protects directives for those. This is the Health and Safety Code that protects doctors, and it also makes it very clear that they will be censured if they don't follow your instructions. Even a person under 18 is actually has the right to have advance directives in Texas, which is very unusual. Some states don't protect minors at all. What is Texas law on assisted death? No one can offer any dying assistance to a person who wants to die or who is suffering. No doctor or healthcare worker are allowed to assist, give advice, or otherwise participate in assistance in a suffering person's death. Palliative care is allowed to relieve suffering. And that's it. You have no other choices in Texas. But that's basically true around the country. When you go to talk to your doctor, let's see, this shows these are the states in red where there are no active, there's no active plan to change the laws for assisted dying. And these are the states: Oregon, Washington State, Vermont, California, Colorado, and Washington, D.C. are the states that do have end-of-life options acts. Okay. There are 5 states, those states I just named, and the District of Columbia, with end-of-life option acts, death with dignity or doctor-assisted death statutes. Over 19 years ago in Oregon, the first state passed their law to have an physician-assisted death. You can see by this graph that the blue, those are the people who have actually gotten prescriptions written. However, the orange notes the people that have actually used the prescription drugs. So there's a big discrepancy, and as time goes on, the divide has been much greater. A lot of people say that the reason that they get the drugs is so they will have that option if they need it. Final Exit Network is the same way. A lot of our members join us because they feel like they want an option if things get very bad with their terminal illness or with their pain. Okay, these are these 3 programs: the Conversation Project, the Game Gift of Grace, National Healthcare Decisions Day. All of these websites are websites that offer very good information about talking with your doctor, talking with your family, talking with your friends, preparing your healthcare surrogate. This is the Conversation Project. This has excellent information that will help you with those conversations. My Gift of Grace is a game. They've also developed a new one called Hello, which is to play within organizations, groups of people. So that's another option. And then there's National Healthcare Decisions Day. This is actually a week-long program that is held in April 16th to the 22nd. And so you might want to check that. This one has really, all three of these have very good opportunities to use their information. Now it's time to talk with your doctor. Even though you can see the humor of this cartoon, doctors have to be educated, and you need to let them know your wishes. In a study of doctors' end-of-life wishes, 90% of them say they do not want CPR. The same study shows that the majority of doctors also don't want intubation or other invasive interventions. These are medical interventions that many patients demand at any cost. 5% of patients create 50% of healthcare costs, according to the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. 30% of all Medicare expenditures are attributed to the 5% of beneficiaries that die each year. 1/3 of that cost occurs in the last month of life. As 75 million baby boomers are heading into their 7th decade of life, terminal illnesses are expected to surge in the next 20 years. We spend an incredible amount of money on that last year and last month of a dying patient's life. And statistics show that this money is actually not well spent and does not help us achieve a peaceful death. According to a study by Dr. Susan Dale Block of Brigham and Women's Healthcare, published in the Archives of Internal Medicine, Dr. Block found that the less money spent in this time period, the better the death experience is for the patient. According to this study, no matter how much is spent on the last year or month, if the person is sick enough, the effort makes things worse. For a better death, receiving all possible interventions is likely not to produce the most peaceful dying experience, according to these studies. Doctor-assisted death is illegal in the state of Texas and is considered a felony. This again is just more about preparing and what would you call a good death? Have you thought about that yourself? And I imagine most people in this audience have, but then have you talked to your family and your friends about what your ideas of a good death would be? And this is kind of where the pavement hits the road. Have you had that talk with your doctor? Do you know what his ideas are? If they come and pick you up in an ambulance, what are your expectations in this community? And I spoke recently in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they've had a situation there where, and around the country, where Catholic hospitals have been buying up a lot of rural community hospitals, and some communities are only served by Catholic hospitals. In Texas, you have the right that if your doctor doesn't agree with what your wishes are, then he has to turn you over to another doctor who does agree. So it's very important that you have the discussion with your doctor ahead of time. 90% of people wish to die at home. 70% actually die in institutions. Only 20 to 30% of Americans have advance directives. How many people here have advance directives? Oh, wow, that is very good. This congregation is way ahead of the general population. I probably didn't have to say that. That's very good. And once again, if we talk about what is a good death, Some people just want to have options available to them at the time that they know that they're going to die. We all know death is not a one-size-fits-all. Death comes in very different shapes and forms, and no two dying experiences are alike. Many of us have had recent experiences with friends and family who have died. Every day through my work with Final Exit Network and as president of Hemlock Society of Florida, I'm confronted with stories of individual dying experiences. Recently, I spoke to a 51-year-old woman who has been diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. She was a weightlifter, a school teacher who loved her work. She described how she watches the spasms as the muscles in her legs and arms twitch involuntarily, and she can practically see her body disintegrating. She can barely speak now, and she knows that she may live many months, even years, in this rapidly worsening condition, trapped in her own body. I also talked to Rick. Rick is a musician who also had a successful career as a regional sales supervisor for a national corporation. He and his wife, Marcia, a teacher, built their dream home together. But now Rick is dying of prostate cancer at 62. His oncologist will no longer prescribe chemotherapy, and he's been referred to hospice. Many Final Exit Network members join our organization because they have seen the difficulties of dying firsthand and recognize that they would like to have a choice as to how they will die. Our medical system, which is more advanced than ever in human history, has found ways to keep individuals alive far longer than ever before, treating illnesses that were previously untreatable, adding years of life for patients who have incurable diseases. But a hands-off approach to the end of life has been very difficult for our medical system to grasp. In spite of the fact that about 70% of the nation believes in the option of a peaceful death, it has been a slow uphill battle to change the laws. In fact, end-of-life option laws have been enacted in only 5 states since 2006. Oregon, Washington State, Vermont, and most recently California and Colorado have end-of-life laws. And Montana's courts have ruled they will not prosecute doctors, but they have not passed an end-of-life options law. Washington, D.C. just passed a law. In Oregon, of the exceedingly few patients who have requested a lethal prescription, 1,545 in 18 years, about 35% never use it. For them, it is merely a means to self-affirmation and empowerment, a reassuring option. Since California passed its law, 20% of the country's population is now covered by end-of-life laws. 55 million U.S. citizens now live in these states, but Texas is not one of them. The laws in California make it difficult for a dying patient to receive help, however. The patient must have a 6-month prognosis and declare they want to die to 2 doctors 15 days apart. The cost of the approved drugs has skyrocketed from $125 5 years ago to over $4,000 today. And many doctors, pharmacies, and hospitals are opting out of supplying this much-needed service to their patients for either religious reasons or because the organizations that they work for, the corporations, don't want to get involved. There are many communities in California, many counties, that do not have any facility or any doctors that will help a patient if they go to them to use the new laws. And that's not to mention that the medication is 90 capsules, which have to each be opened by the patient and taken with a concoction of other medications. Most recently, End-of-Life Options Washington State has come up with a less expensive concoction of 4 drugs, and that comes to about $300. They also have to have, part of that is a drug to relax the person, an anti-anxiety drug, an anti-nausea drug, but in that concoction, it's much less expensive and easier to find a pharmacy that will fill those prescriptions. One other statistic, Final Exit Network has supported more individuals this year than ever before, especially in California. So now, how do you achieve a good death? First of all, how do we identify a good death? Dr. Monica Williams Murphy, a certified emergency room physician in Huntsville, Alabama, has identified the prerequisites for a good death. Her analysis came from a crisis of consciousness she experienced in her emergency room when a 95-year-old patient was brought in. Her experience with that woman provoked her to rethink how doctors treat elderly patients. The patient was brought in by ambulance from a local nursing home. She went into cardiac arrest, and with no advance directives or DNR orders, Dr. Murphy was forced to follow typical hospital protocols which required CPR, immediately breaking multiple ribs and causing severe internal damage. As she describes it, she heard the all too familiar snap, crackle, pop of brittle bones breaking, knowing the woman had little hope of survival. When Dr. Murphy recounts this story in a room full of doctors, you can hear an audible groan as the doctors in the audience painfully confirm the all too familiar sound she describes and the terrible feeling that comes over them when they treat an elderly or frail patient with CPR, which is often hospital protocol if you do not have a DNR or advance directives or someone there to express your wishes for you. Dr. Murphy has written a book, It's Okay to Die. She now presents a program for doctors, nurses, and hospices entitled America's End of Life Ethical Dilemma. Is there a time when it is okay to die? Dr. Murphy has come up with 6 important goals to achieve when you or a loved one is facing death. She calls this window of time the sacred space. These are the goals she has identified. Ask for forgiveness, give forgiveness, say thank you, say I love you, I will love you forever, say it's okay to die, and say goodbye. She tells a really beautiful story of a man who's brought in. He was suffering from COPD, and she looks around in the emergency room for someone, and she asks her nurse, does he have DNR or advance directives? And the nurse opens the curtain, and there's his wife standing there. She describes her as a little short woman, and all she can see is her papers. In Florida, I don't know if it's required here, but in Florida, they have to be on a yellow sheet of paper. So it's very distinctive. And she said that then she spoke to the wife. They called the children. They all circled around his bed. They knew that he was dying. They held one daughter was on one side, another daughter was on the other side. They held hands as he died peacefully. They talked to him about his life, about how important he was to them. And she said that it was just one of the most beautiful dying experiences that she had ever participated in. This, of course, is in an emergency room situation. She also says, okay, these are her 6 goals that she shares with her patients, but she also says, if you have more time, that she believes it's important to leave a legacy. In this powerful end-of-life space, or before, hopefully, write, record, or video your story to pass on to your family and others. It gives value to your life and to theirs. Another doctor has expanded the attributes of a quality dying experience. In a study entitled Moving Toward Peace, an analysis of the concept of a good death, Dr. Karen Keel of the University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Nursing has identified the attributes of a good death as described in modern literature. Being in control, being comfortable, sense of closure, affirmation, value of the dying person is recognized, trust in care providers, recognition of impending death, beliefs and values are honored, burden is minimized, relationships are optimized, acceptance of appropriateness of death, leaving a legacy, and family care. One of the best illustrations that I know of planning a good death is the story of a young woman who was featured in an article in USA Today recently. Jerica Bolin lived in Appleton, Wisconsin. She suffered from type 2 muscular atrophy, a disease she was diagnosed with as an infant. She was brought to my attention by the Orlando Sentinel newspaper when I was asked to write an op-ed article in support of 14-year-old Jerica's decision to die. A disability rights advocate organization had tried to file an injunction to prevent Jerica from entering hospice and declining treatment. Jerica had lived her entire life in a wheelchair, almost completely paralyzed, with her head held up by a brace. She had suffered through 33 major operations, each more serious and invasive than the last. When her doctor said she must have another operation, which would only delay the inevitable advancing into her life, she said no, no more. And then she planned a party. Her wish was to have a farewell prom, and she did. It was attended by over 1,000 friends and supporters at the Appleton Grand Meridian Banquet Hall. She was escorted to her prom by a police escort, and her favorite music star attended. And what can we learn from Jerica Bolin? The end-of-life decisions are complex. We should all make these decisions thoughtfully, but also respect the decisions of others. In her own beautiful and decisive way, Jerica chose to smell the roses, to have a party, enjoy her friends, spread joy in her world, raise awareness for spinal muscular atrophy, and become a light for the rest of us who will have to find our own answers to our very personal life and death questions. Her family was fully informed, and as hard a decision as it must have been to make, she made her decision and convinced them that this was what she wanted and that she deserved their support. After her prom, she was admitted to hospice and died surrounded by her friends and family. The question for us, just as for Jerica, what are the decisions that we have to make when we face the end of our lives? So then the question we need to answer for ourselves is exactly the one this brave teenager answered for herself. How do we say goodbye? Quickly, I want to say just a few words about Final Exit Network. The network has 3,000 members across the United States. The core mission of our work is our volunteer exit guide program, which provides education, support, and a compassionate presence if and when a member chooses to exercise their right to end their pain and suffering. We have a medical committee of 3 doctors who review records of those who apply to exit. They must agree unanimously on the eligibility of individuals to qualify. Our support is varied. We recommend hospice, a mix of medications, the use of inert gas, and the voluntary cessation of food and water, all of which require specialized education and support for a successful outcome. But all are ways to achieve a peaceful and dignified death for those who are able to qualify for our exit guide program. We have protocols in place to make sure that the person actually is suffering from the disease and or has a pain that has been long in treatment and they are not able to get treatment that relieves their pain. So I'd like to ask you all, if you agree with what we do in Final Exit Network, to consider joining us. We basically, the people who join are the ones who pay for our programs. No one is charged for any of our services. Our exit guides are elderly themselves. They are all volunteers, and they go throughout the United States, again, with no charge to patients. So if you join, your membership helps pay for those services. We're a completely volunteer organization, and we have our exit guides are just incredible, dedicated volunteers. So with that, I think we will take questions.
My name is Ed Crew, and my question is, if you choose to go to another state for your final exit, do you have to live there? Is there a statute that says you have to have residence there, or can you go as a visitor?
I think Oregon does. I'm not sure about all the states, but for us, that's only if you want to take advantage of the end-of-life option laws. For us, in our organization, we believe that it's more important for any dying individual to stay in their own home and to be surrounded by their family and friends, their normal surroundings. So that's why we support our members in their own homes. We feel like they shouldn't have to leave to go to another state. There's a very famous, recently famous case of Brittany Maynard, who went to Oregon. She established residency there, and she did end her life. She suffered from a brain tumor. And if you want to pick up and move to another state, establish residency, and use their laws, each state is different. So out of those choices you have of states, you need to go and read about their laws. There's a the Death with Dignity National Center. And I think it's very easy, just Google it. They have the laws in every state, and they can direct you towards someone who can answer exactly this. If you wanted to go to California, they can direct you to people who would give you that information. You can also, our website is finalexitnetwork.org, and if you call that phone number that we have on the website, you would get a person who will call you back, and they will give you that information too about whichever state it is you're interested in. But we basically just believe that you should be able to die in your own home, surrounded by the people that you love in familiar surroundings.
But you can't do that in the state of Texas, is what I understood you to say.
You cannot be assisted. However, with our protocols, we educate our members as to what your options are. The book written by Derek Humphreys explains a lot of different options, but we feel like that if you participate in Final Exit Network, exit guides are sent to educate you as to what your legal options are, and you can die in your own home. Now, we do give you an exit guide. We have senior and junior exit guides that come to visit you, interview you. You supply us with medical records. 3 doctors participate on our medical committee. Once they agree, this usually takes about 3 weeks. It's not as long and as drawn out as it sounds. It usually takes 3 weeks. It might take longer. Some people have applied to exit, and 5 years later, their exit guide says, well, this person's now my best friend. And it's like they become close to their exit guide. Sometimes they never even hear from their exit guide. And I also hear that, is that the exit guide, they call the exit guide just when they feel like it's time for them to exit. But they are educated as to what their options are in their own home, and they are all legal options. But it does require that you are not in a state where you cannot do it yourself. You have to be able, your doctor cannot assist you. Even in Oregon or California or any of the states where it's legal, you still have to be able to, I think it's, in California, it's 15 days apart. You have to go to 2 different doctors, and you have to express your interest in dying, and then they will give you the prescription. So it still requires a good bit of participation on your part. It's not, you cannot be in a coma and expect anyone to pull the plug basically on you unless your advance directives tell your doctor exactly what they can and cannot do to keep you alive in that state. But does that answer your question? Everything we do is legal, but it's basically the person who is suffering or has the illness, say like ALS. In the last 6 months of your life, if you have ALS, you probably won't be able to swallow. And so even if you could get residency, set up residency, or move to those other states, then you still might not be able to participate using those laws. And those are the people that we help, are people who could not qualify. In fact, we get a lot of calls from California right now, Oregon, all of the other states where it's legal, because people suffer from end-stage cancer, Parkinson's, ALS, MS, a lot of diseases that in the last 6 months they would not be able to physically participate in what is required by those laws. Okay.
So a follow-up question I personally have is, I guess it was this American Life story that I heard about a lady who was passing and wanted her son to help her pass. And I guess the question would be, none of us would want our loved ones to be charged with a felony, of course, in aiding for a death that they knew was with dignity. So this would help set up ahead of time. So I'm really grateful that you're here. Yeah. Okay.
There's no provision in the death with dignity laws for progressive diseases like Alzheimer's. Is there any possibility of changing that in the future? And there was a suicide tourism, basically. There was a frontline on PBS, basically, of that title. Can you comment on that a bit?
Okay, 2 questions. The first, whether that law is going to change. The 6-month, I doubt that there's no movement that I know of, other than in Final Exit Network. We do disagree with the 6-month provision. We feel like it at least should be a year, because there are just so many diseases that we see that 6 months is too late for anyone, for many of the people that come to us. We don't see, basically, we don't get involved with legislation, because we feel like that being a compassionate presence with individuals who are suffering now is our mission. Death with Dignity National Center and Compassion and Choices are 2 other national groups that do get involved with legislation. Many of our members belong to other groups as well. And we support legislation, but we do not actively try to advance legislation. We are in court cases in other states. Over the years, we've had court cases in other states. We're now in Minnesota. We hope to go to the Supreme Court of the United States eventually. And in Canada, their Supreme Court turned over all of their laws, basically, that had to do with death with dignity, and said you have a right to end your life because of suffering if you want to. And they are going through developing new laws. They're sort of in the throes of all of that right now, because it was a very liberal ruling, and we hope to one day, we feel like the court system is probably the most likely opportunity. My husband, Robert Rivas, is the person who's handling that case in Minnesota and hopes to go to the Supreme Court. So maybe he will one day, and maybe he'll change these laws. There's another frontline program. It's called the Suicide Plan, and that features Final Exit Network is in that program. As far as going to another country, we do hear of people doing that. It's very expensive. I think it's around $12,000, and there are lots of other associated expenses. That's again one of the reasons for our organization and the passion that our exit guides bring to their work is that they see that most people are not in a situation where they could afford to go to Dignitas or go to the Netherlands or wherever they choose to go. It's just prohibitive. Most people could not do that. Plus, if you're that ill, is that the way you want to spend your time, is on a transatlantic flight going to end your life? It's a little, there's so many difficulties presented there, but we do have people call and who want information, and then they make a decision as to what they want to do.
This all sounds extremely complicated, but here's what I think that you have said.
Okay.
It would be, if you go to your lawyer and you have an advance directive all written up, then can you get this in Texas, even though it's written up and a lawyer has done it? That's what I don't understand. Or are you really saying you better go to Canada?
No. Well, I think we should all go to Canada right now, honestly. But
Okay, let's say I have an advance directive. Is it
Right.
no problem if I live in Texas?
no, it's not. Actually, I had Robert look up all the laws in Texas, and Texas actually has very strong advance directives laws that your doctor can be sanctioned if he doesn't follow your advance directives. And there are forms on their website, your government website for the state of Texas, to fill out. You don't even have to go to a lawyer. They also recognize your advance directives if you've completed them in another state, and then you present them to your doctor in Texas. There's a provision in your law that says that they are required to follow them. So it's actually all very much simpler, probably. The nuances are, after discussing nuances, it makes it sound a little complicated. But you could actually just Google advance directive laws, and basically you would call our number that's on the website or in any of the brochures and newsletters in the back of the room, and I would encourage you to pick up those, mainly because I don't want to take them home with me to Florida. But you'll learn a lot of information about what we do, and there's a phone number. You can call that number. You will be put in touch with someone in the exit guide program, and from everything the feedback I get from people who are in the exit guide program, it's very simple, and they are basically walked through every step of the way. So the only thing we cannot do is do it for you. We can support you with education. We can support you with information. And we can support you by having a person present with you to be sure everything goes right at the time of your choosing. But we cannot do anything for you actively to enable you to die. And anyone who uses our services is very clear about that. And some people say, oh, I just can't imagine this. But we're talking about people who have very dire circumstances that they are looking forward to, and they know what is in their future. And they may have already suffered for many years before they get to the point of giving us a phone call and asking us to support them with our services. Does that answer the question, Martha? Is that?
Joanne.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Joanne, I have a two-part question. I saw on television where this person went to the emergency room and had DNR tattooed to their chest, and it was accepted by the hospital. And I'm wondering if you could have a bracelet made, a medical alert bracelet, to say DNR, and would it be accepted by the medical services?
They actually explain that in your Texas laws, and they say a bracelet, a necklace. There are a variety of ways that you can present that DNR to them. That's an interesting story about the tattoo. But you have to, the doctor, doesn't a doctor have to sign the DNR order in Texas?
What's good about the Texas law, it's more advanced than the laws of most states regarding DNRs, which are totally separate from advanced directives. But a do not resuscitate order in most states you have to have in Florida, you have to have the yellow form with the doctor's signature on it. If you can't find that at the moment an ambulance arrives, you're out of luck. The ambulance driver is going to break all the ribs in your chest to restart your heart. Texas has a law that specifically says if somebody's wearing a bracelet reflecting that they have a DNR order in effect or a necklace, that is accepted without the requirement that you have the signed special colored piece of paper from the doctor. It's more like Texas seems to want to encourage people to use these laws rather than...
Which is very good. In other parts of the country, it can be very difficult to get doctors to even listen to your wishes. However, I will tell you one other thing. Final Exit Network, as part of our membership, the one thing that you do get besides our newsletter quarterly is the U.S. Living Will Registry, which is an online registry. You get when you send them your living will and they have your wishes, everything is filed online, and you get a card that's in your wallet. And so then you would just, whoever is with you would know to, and usually they do go through your wallet, and if you're by yourself somewhere, and find, if you have information, emergency information. So it's online and accessible at all times. And that's just part of it's free with membership.
Can you speak to the very gray area of people who are diagnosed with early dementia, who know that they don't want to be alive for 20 years with that diagnosis, but are physically very well? Do I need to say more?
On our website, we have a person, her name is Faith Riverstone. She's located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I interviewed her last year, and she has advancing early onset dementia. It was just the most fascinating conversation. A brilliant woman. She was diagnosed at 47. And that is a particular diagnosis. You would follow the same steps if you were part of our exit guide services. Then you would follow the same steps. You would have to provide your medical records. We have 3 doctors that have to all come to a unanimous decision. And we do this to protect our organization. It's amazing how many people, and we have had cases where people will come to us who want us to help them just to commit suicide. So we have to be very careful to protect the organization, to follow our protocols, but also to be sure that we're serving our members properly. But again, it would be the same thing, and you have to do it early enough. Faith, it was incredible talking to her. She talked about how dementia was for her. She said it was like the rings of a tree, and that there would be an outside ring of things that she could do, things she could remember. And she said she would sort of notice it getting fuzzy, and then all of a sudden, poof, it would be gone, and then it would close into the next ring. And she was, I think, 51 at the point we talked, and she'd been diagnosed at 47. And so it had pretty rapidly advanced at that point. She could still talk very well, just a brilliant person. I could not believe the things that she could just rattle off and remember about her life and work she had done, but then there were just things that were gone. And so you have to, if you are diagnosed with that sort of an illness, then you need to start making plans for how you want your life to proceed from then on.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi. I'm Nancy Walker. I'm the Executive Director of the Funeral Consumers Alliance of Central Texas, that some of you longtime people know used to be AMBUS. All right. We teach classes on end-of-life options, stress the importance of advanced directive documents, but specifically I want to mention the directive, the out-of-hospital, do not resuscitate, and we were talking about wearing pendants and bracelets. In order to have a valid pendant or bracelet that the EMS would honor, so that they wouldn't start breaking your chest bones, doing CPR and things like that. You need to first get on paper an out-of-hospital do not resuscitate form. It needs to be witnessed by 2 people or notarized. Once you've done that, you take the form to your physician. This form is not valid until a physician signs it. Then you've got a completed document. You would look at a list of approved vendors. This is really important. You can't just get a DNR medallion on eBay, for example. So the Department of Health Services lists on their website who those approved vendors are. You fax a copy of your completed out-of-hospital DNR to the vendor. Then the vendor will send you whatever bracelet or medallion you've selected.
That's very good information from, I'm sure you've had plenty of experience with that. But it definitely, even in every state I've been to, a DNR has to be signed by the doctor. So you need to check whatever state you're in this case Texas, but that's very good.
Yes. My name is Judith Munyon. I have been a member of Final Exit for a long time and a former Hemlock person.
That's wonderful.
And I and have participated as an exit guide. What is the situation right now with the helium?
Okay,
That's question one.
Yeah, helium actually, for a while they thought that the reserves were very low and that you could not purchase helium easily, 100% helium. Now they have found another source, and there are several sources that are available where you can get 100% helium. Helium is an inert gas, which used to be our preferred method for exits. Now we have gone to nitrogen. It's also readily available, and it has a regulator that comes with it. So now we've gone to nitrogen more than helium, mainly because for a while you just could not get 100% helium. And that's one of our choices for helping people.
So the 100% helium, that no longer can you go to Walmart and pick up a tank because that possibly
You know
has
what?
oxygen.
It varies around the country. We found when I travel, to one place or another, I have people stand up and say, "Oh, well, we have 100% helium here," but then other people say, "No, you don't want to use that. It has oxygen mixed in with it, and you would not want to take a chance if it does not say 100% helium, we would not recommend that." But again, if you've been an exit guide, which that's wonderful that you have been. Personally, the people I know who are exit guides are just some of the most wonderful people that I have had the opportunity to be associated with. I am just so impressed at the compassion and kindness that it takes to do that work. And they try, they're trained once a year. We have a training in October for our exit guides. And it's just an amazing group of people. So I applaud you for that work.
We have about 4 minutes left, so do you want to make final summation, or do we have another question? We have another question from John.
I would
Frank.
say this is when we're talking about helium or nitrogen or any other, if you read Final Exit, it pretty much describes choices that you might have to end your life. But one of the things that you don't want to do is to have something go wrong by not doing something properly. And that's where exit guides come in, is your education. If if you participate in the exit guide program, we have never had anything go wrong. We've never had an unsuccessful exit. And that's really critical because you don't want to end up in a worse situation than you were before. And so it's very important that if you plan to go that route, that you're with people who are compassionate, who have correct information, and they are knowledgeable about what you would need to do.
Looking at your latest newsletter, I noticed the Minnesota case. Can you comment on that a little bit? Because that seems like the most ridiculous law I've ever seen.
Well, it is. We believe it is a First Amendment case, that it's basically, there was a woman, Doreen Dunn, who lived in Apple Valley, Minnesota. She wrote a letter to us asking for exit guide services. She had been suffering for 10 years. She was a bassoonist, I believe, and they have neck and shoulder problems often, and she was given a barium dye in her spine that disintegrated her spine. Her family did not know her choice to exit when she exited. She asked us for help. She said she just couldn't take it any longer. She laid on a couch all day long with a rag around her arm because she might touch something. She was just in excruciating pain all the time. But in any case, the district attorney brought charges against Final Exit Network and our exit guides. As I said, that they are normally older people themselves. 3 of the exit guides, I believe, have died since the time the charges were brought, 2 or 3. I think 1 is elderly and just couldn't come to the trial. She was not well. But in the end, the only thing that happened is we were charged that as an organization, we paid $33,000 fine. We are in appeals right now. We have won, in the beginning we won 1 appeal. We went to jury trial. It's sort of convoluted the way Minnesota laws are. But we ended up, now we're in appeals court again and hoping to go back to the Supreme Court of Minnesota, and it would be a wish of ours to go to the Supreme Court of the United States. I don't know that that's likely to happen, but we hope to win in the Minnesota Supreme Court. And Robert's the attorney, along with, around the country, we have had incredible attorneys. Every time we've had a case, which is in Georgia, Arizona, and now Minnesota, all relating to an original Georgia case, we have had incredible attorneys step forward who have been, who devote their time, they give us pro bono time, and work for just incredible, reasonable hourly rates to defend us. So we've been very proud of the attorneys that have come to our aid.
All right, thank you very much for a very helpful and thought-provoking presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.